Hello girls and boys, my name is Miss Vanessa and welcome to a story time video. Now in this video I chose a story to read for you all, and after we finish we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about some of the main points. We're going to talk about what I feel the meaning behind the story is. We're going to work in some personal experiences. So yeah, let's not waste any more time and let's jump right into this video. Now, before I start reading, I want you guys to keep something in mind while I'm reading. I want you to think about a time in your life where you felt like you weren't making as much progress as you want to in comparison to somebody else. I want you to think about a time that you compared yourself to somebody else where you wondered why maybe you're not doing as good as somebody else is. I want you to keep that kind of experience in your head as I read this story. So, the story that we're going to be reading today is The Great Hill by Daniel Errico. Before time was time, there was a great hill. And on the great hill, there lived Yolks. The Yolks spent their entire lives climbing the great hill, trying to reach the top. Some Yolks climbed fast. Some Yolks climbed slowly. One Yolk in particular was a very slow climber. He was different than the rest of the Yolks. When he climbed, all the other Yolks passed him, and it was hard for him to watch them pass by. He felt like the worst climber in the world. Some Yolks made fun of him as they passed. Others didn't. Some Yolks wanted to help him climb, but he didn't let them. It was hard for him to climb. It was even harder when it rained because the ground got slippery. Sometimes it seemed like it was only raining on him, but it wasn't. There were times when he felt like he wasn't moving at all, but he was. Then one day he met another Yolk who climbed even slower than he did. He helped the slower Yolk climb. "Thank you," said the slower Yolk. "You're welcome," said the slow Yolk. "I can't be much of help to anyone else since I climb so slowly." "Slowly?" asked the slower Yolk. "Well, yes. I watch Yolks pass me all the time. I do not know if you are slow or fast, but I do know that you helped me and that you were still climbing." The slow Yolk said goodbye to the slower Yolk and kept climbing. "Still climbing," he thought to himself. "That is true," and he smiled. So the Yolk kept climbing. He climbed when it was nice out, he climbed when it rained, and he even climbed when it snowed. As he kept climbing, he got better and better. Sometimes he would pass other Yolks, and sometimes they would pass him. He had stopped paying attention. He noticed that some Yolks were no longer climbing. When a Yolk stops climbing, it stays where it is. Some Yolks stop climbing because they are happy with how far they have gone. Others stop climbing because they don't want to climb anymore. The Yolks that had stopped climbing did not like to be passed, and they made it harder to get by. But the Yolk kept climbing, right over them. There were still times when the Yolk thought he was climbing an impossible hill, but he kept climbing. Always, always climbing. Do you think he made it to the top? Alright guys, that's the end of our story. I hope you liked the one that I picked out. Now let's jump right into our post-reading discussion. We are introduced to these creatures that are called Yolks, and their entire life purpose is to climb this great hill. And we are introduced to our main character, the slow Yolk, who seems to climb a lot slower than the rest of the Yolks. in comparison. Now, the fact that he climbs really slow makes him feel insecure. It makes him start to question how good he is in comparison to everybody else. And now notice that I keep saying in comparison. And a lot of us have felt this way, including myself, where the moment we start comparing ourselves to somebody else, we feel insecure about our own abilities. We start to feel like maybe we're not as good as everybody else and that we're not doing what we're meant to be doing. And it's not a fun feeling to feel. It really brings us down. It brings down our self-esteem. We don't feel as good about ourselves and our abilities to do the things that we want and love to do. There are moments in the story where it says that it feels like it's just raining on him or that he isn't moving, and we also can feel like this, that we're the only people who are struggling. It's really easy to feel like how we are feeling, you know, so badly about ourselves that only we feel that way, when in reality, that's not true. There are a lot of people who do feel the same way that you do, who do struggle with certain things the same way that you do. And we realize this when, in the story, we're introduced to a slower yoke who is moving even slower than the slow yoke. And he didn't even think that was possible for somebody to be moving even slower than he moves. But we do. We meet somebody who struggles the same way that the slow yoke struggles. The slow yoke helps the slower yoke climb, and this is the turning point in the story where the slower yoke reminds him that, you know, whether or not you're doing, you know, better or worse than all the other yokes, you still helped me and you are still climbing despite all the insecurities you're feeling. You're still moving forward even though you might not feel that great about how you're doing. And it's really important to remember to do that when we still might not be feeling the best about ourselves. It's still important to keep pushing ourselves forward. The more we push ourselves and practice at things, the better we're gonna get at them. Just like how we see in the story, when he didn't give up, he kept on going the way that he was going, he eventually got better. He got better at his own pace. And we have to remember that we all get better at things at our own pace. You're not gonna be doing things as fast as somebody else does, whether it's you're joining a new sport team and you're wondering why you're not as good as everybody else, or you're not catching on to things as fast as everybody else. It doesn't matter how everybody else is doing, because you move at your own pace. You do things the way that you're meant to learn them, not the way that other people learn, because how other people learn isn't the same way how you learn. Or even in class, there might be a subject that you struggle with. Like for me, I always struggled with math growing up, and I always wondered why everybody else would seem to get a lesson faster than I would, and it would be so frustrating because I wanted to be able to learn as quickly as everybody else was, because I felt, you know, not that great about myself. My self-esteem was lowered. But I realized that I had to stop comparing myself to everybody else. I learned at the pace that I meant to learn at, and it's important to remember that. Another important part of the story is when we're told that some of the yokes just stop climbing altogether, and we can, you know, view that as people who just give up. And it's really easy to give up when you're not initially really good at something. When you first start something, we all want to be really good at it off the bat, but that's not how it works. We have to keep practicing so that we can get better. And if you give up, you're just going to stay at the same place that you are, just like the yokes. When they stop moving, they stay at the same place that they're at. And they're never going to get any better if they don't push themselves to keep climbing despite how hard it is. Now, our story finishes off with the question, do you think he made it to the top? Now, I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes. I want you to sit and think about it after everything that we've talked about, whether or not you think that the slow yoke eventually made it to the top of the hill. Now that I gave you guys some time to think about that question, I want you to comment down below what you guys think happens. I'm going to give you my personal take on it, and I do believe that as long as the slow yolk didn't give up, he did make it to the top. And we all have the ability to make it to the top at whatever you want to do, as long as you don't give up. You have to have perseverance. You have to keep pushing yourself no matter how hard things get. Now, the easier thing to do is to just give up. You know, why bother if I'm never going to be the best at it? But you can't go into something with the mindset of being the best, but more so going into something with the mindset of doing your personal best. The only thing that you can do is the best that you can do. Now, you can be like the yolks who just stopped climbing altogether and thought that, you know, this is the best that I can do, so I'm just gonna stop right now. Or you can be like the slow yolk who pushes past all those other yolks and says, you know what, this isn't the best that I can do. I know I can do better. I just have to keep pushing myself to do it. Alright guys, now before we finish off this video, I want to bring in a different perspective. I'm going to bring in my little sister. I'm going to ask her some questions that relate to this story. I want to get her opinion, her take on this, and then maybe we can discuss a little bit more. So yeah. Alright guys, this is my little sister Samantha.
Hi!
I gave her a little bit of a summary about what the story was about, and now we're going to jump right into the questions. So, I want you to think about a time in your life where you compared yourself to somebody else, you know, how that made you feel, what the experience was like, and what you did to pull yourself out of that mindset.
Okay, so, I remember in art class, I'm not the best drawer, or, you know, I'm bad at art. So, I had this girl who sat in front of me, and her name was Nancy, and she's, like, literally the best. She's so good at everything. Like, I've never met a person who can draw as good as she is. And I always thought that, I went, man, I wish I could draw like Nancy. Like, how is she so good? But, you know, I thought to myself, everyone has something that they're good at. And you may not be good at drawing like I was, but that doesn't mean that you don't have something that you're not good at. You could be good at playing soccer, or you could be good at dancing. There's always something that you're good at, and it's good to remember your strengths, because those are what matter, not your weaknesses.
Well, that was really good. I like that. I mean, I was telling them earlier that something I always struggled with growing up was math. Like, I was just not the best at math whatsoever. And I used to compare myself to how other kids would, like, you know, when you're sitting in a lesson and the teacher is making you do problems on board, on the chalkboard or the whiteboard, and you have people next to you that are just like flying through the problems, you know, just like like they just got it. And then there's me just struggling.
What's 2 plus 2?
What's 2 plus 2? Like, I just, you know, like, I'm just sitting there struggling, and I used to get so frustrated, like, oh my gosh, why can't I learn math as quick as everybody else does? But I had to, you know, remind myself that I have to keep practicing to get better, and that you get better at your own pace. You know, I had to remind myself that I can't keep sitting here and comparing myself to everybody else, because I have to do things at my own pace. I have to practice and push myself, and I'll get there. I might not get there as fast as other people are going to get there, but I have to remember that I'm going to eventually get to the point that I'm meant to be at. So the next question I want to ask you is, what do you think happens to somebody's self-esteem when they continuously compare themselves to somebody else?
I think that can lower their self-esteem, because, you know, you're always like, oh, why can't I be as good as they are? Why are they so much better than me? And, you know, well, everyone has those thoughts, and they are normal. It's best to not, like, worry about it or just think about it all the time, because it's not going to get you far. Just remind yourself that I may not be as good as Timmy and Sally are at A, B, C, whatever, but I'm sure you have your own strengths and that you are good at something, and you should focus on what you are good at and not worry about everyone else, what everyone else is good at.
Like what you're lacking.
Yeah, because you're not everyone else. You're you.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the 2 main ideas throughout the story, which are perspective and perseverance. So what do those mean to you?
Perseverance is something that's, like, really good to have, because it motivates you to keep going. So, like, an example could be when we all started writing in, like, kindergarten, you know, writing our ABCs and writing our names. we all had pretty, not that good handwriting because, we just started, but we still persevered, and slowly but surely we all got better. So it's like, that's a good example, I think, of how perseverance works, that right now you may not be good at it, but that doesn't mean in the future that you won't, because you will be better at it, because you just need time to practice. And with perspective is that when we look at things from like our own perspective, we tend to be harsher and always point out where we're lacking and what we're not good at. But it's also really important to step back and look at things from like the big picture, because anything that you're doing, any progress is still progress. So
yeah, that's a good answer.
Yeah, that's all I got.
Alright guys, I'm going to be finishing off this little interview session with my sister by asking her the question that the story asks us at the end. I asked our viewers this question, I gave my opinion on it, but I want to hear yours, which is, do you think he made it to the top?
I think he did make it to the top, because despite everything that happened to him, he still kept climbing, and he even found a friend that showed him, well, even though you might be a little bit slower than everyone else, you still have come so far than where you were when you first started, all the way at the bottom of the hill. So despite maybe sometimes you feel like, oh, I'm never gonna get it, I'm never gonna finish this, I'm just never gonna get good, you have come so far from where you first started. So
beautiful answer.
Thank you.
I like that. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this story time video. I want to know all about what you guys thought about the story. Let me know what your opinions and thoughts are down in the comments below, and I will see you all in my next video. But until then, have fun and stay safe. Bye!